Hi there, I'm Johnny Richardson and part of the team at Gecko, and it's my pleasure to run you through the Cloud Call Center training for Gecko. Now, this is a training session which is designed specifically for system administrators, or those of you who are going to be looking after the account, maybe involved in setting up the account, or wanting and needing to understand things like outcomes, importing, integrations, different fields within Gecko. Now, if all you're looking to do is log into Gecko, have a lovely time, maybe import some contacts and start calling them as quickly as humanly possible, we have a getting started guide, which is basically what we're going to go through today, but in a much more condensed way, with only the information relevant to you. If you are wanting a slower, more methodical breakdown of how the system works, though, this is absolutely the right place, and it's great to have you here. Now, in this video, as I said, we're going to cover a lot. We're going to talk about workflows, emailing and texting, calling, building call scripts, and all of those good things. And let's start with a little bit of orientation with the Gecko platform. Once you've logged in, this is likely what you'll see, and you'll notice on the left-hand nav bar here, we'll be able to scroll through and view almost everything you can do in Gecko. So view all of our contacts, all of the responses to our forms or scripts, a log of any emails or texts we've sent, any calls we've made, dashboards, settings, where we're going to spend a lot of time today, where our events, forms, mass texts and emails are managed, also landing pages, and crucially for us today, call scripts and call campaigns. Now, in addition to having that wonderful menu, which actually can be collapsed, or expanded just by clicking this button at the very bottom, you have the ability to click your name in the top right-hand corner, which gives you some lovely further options. Two of the most important things that we have in the entire platform are right here. Firstly, the Gecko Academy. It's a resource, use it, it's wonderful. I'm a little bit biased in saying that because I've written some things for it, but it basically contains everything we're going to be going through today and more. You've also got a handy search bar, so if there's something in particular you're looking for, just search there and hit return to find the articles that work for you. If you'd rather speak with one of us, though, you've also got the ability to contact support, and my goodness, reach out if you need anything at all. We love nothing more than kind of answering questions, but also we love it when people just want to bounce ideas off of us or understand the best or most efficient way of setting things up. Let us know. Here too, from this menu, you can also do things like manage your user settings, submit any feedback you'd like to, or product suggestions, and also the ability to see any changes we've launched and the service status of Gecko in general just there. So we want to learn how to make calls in Gecko. So what better place to start than actually by buying or procuring a telephone number with which to start making those calls. Let's begin then by navigating to settings and either searching on the search bar here for VoIP numbers, or I'll move my face out the way, clicking the calls and SMS option here, and this will give us a lot of the different settings that we're going to use for managing our calls efficiently going forward. Let's click VoIP numbers to get started. Now this, I'm cheating a bit, is not a blank account. I've got a few things already set up here, so don't be surprised if your table looks blank, but this shows you any numbers we already have, the name of them internally in Gecko, the number that we're using, and also their capability. So can we call on them? Can we send text messages? The call to action to build a new number is in the same place as every other call to action in Gecko, which is the top right hand corner. So let's click new number, and we can choose what type of number we want to get. We could, for example, verify a number, which a good way of describing this is if in your office you have a number, and if you call students from that number, on their devices it'll say Gecko University calling, rather than just the random telephone number. That's a number which is masked. You already have that kind of name affixed with it. So if you have that type of number, just enter the telephone number for it in this field, give it an internal name in Gecko, hit save, and you'll actually receive a phone call on that number in a couple of seconds time from Twilio, the service we use to send texts and make calls. It'll give you a code, enter that code into Gecko, hit save, and then this is a number you'll be able to start dialing from within Gecko. If you don't have that type of number, don't feel bad. I don't at the minute I'm at home, but you can click new number. You can choose to purchase or procure a number, hit OK, and give your number a brand new name. I'm going to call mine the Academy number because I'm quite lazy and not very good with names. Choose a location that you want this to appear from, and you've also got the ability to further hone down the results we're going to get back in a moment by adding a dial code. Choose the type of number you want to add. There's a couple of different to choose from, and crucially choose whether or not you want this to be a number just for calling or for calling and texting as well. Hit search when you're ready, and this will return a list of all of the available numbers you can currently select, including what this number is capable of doing. Choose a number that looks good to you, this one, and let's hit OK. And this is now a number that we're going to be able to start calling and texting students from immediately. There's no limit to the number of different unique numbers that you get, so don't feel bad about adding additional ones in the future. Now we have our number, let's start calling people, let's build a campaign. And it's worth saying that within Gecko there's a few ways of calling contacts that we're going to go through. We can call them on an individual basis, but we're going to focus in this video on campaigns, which is where we have a big group of students and we want to set this up so that our call agents are ready to start dialing those numbers. Let's navigate to call campaigns, and here we see a list of all of our available campaigns, and these are filterable by current or active, pending, completed, or invalid campaigns. And we can also choose to clone, export, or delete existing campaigns, or clicking into them to view them. We, however, want to build a brand new campaign, so let's click New Campaign in the top right-hand corner. It's a very simple setup for campaigns. We've got a couple of different windows and different cards to run through here. Let's begin by giving it a title. So we'll call this the Academy Training Campaign. We can choose to give this an internal description. Now this is purely internal for internal use. If there's a curious person who clicks into it and they want to understand what it's about, it can just add a bit of context. You can tell Gecko which consent reasons we should check for to determine which contacts are eligible to be called. Now, consent is a very complex subject. It's managed differently by different institutions in different geographical reasons, different areas, and we have a really good Academy article that breaks down exactly how Gecko handles this. You do also have the ability, if you're not interested in any of that stuff and you just want to make some calls, thank you very much, of telling Gecko, ignore all consent reasons, just by toggling this here. Moving on to the next card, we have some of my favorite features for campaigns. You can tell Gecko, for example, the date and the time for this to start, and you can set an end date as well. So if this campaign is only going to be relevant for a certain amount of time, you can tell Gecko automatically stop people from being able to call at this end time. But you can, of course, leave these blank if there's no specified end or start time in mind. One of the most useful and popular bits of functionality is right here, the callback timeout period. And in plain English, this basically means if I make a call to a student, how long should we wait, should Gecko wait that is, until it recycles that contact and makes them available to be called again. This is a great fail-safe against two members of the team accidentally calling the same student really quickly in quick succession. So if we set this as, for example, 5 hours, it would mean after I've finished calling them, even if it goes to voicemail, because I've tried calling them, they're not going to be available for another call for 5 hours. You can, of course, leave this blank if you want people recycled instantly, and it's entirely up to you how you set this up. In the campaign options section, we have the ability to build or use a call script. Now, this is entirely optional, but if you want to give your callers a verbatim, word-by-word, blow-by-blow account of what they should say and use conditional logics based on what the student says back to them to inform future kind of pathways in the conversation, you can choose to do that. You could also choose to have a script just with bullet points of here are the main things we want you to talk about. You can also leave this blank. So there's a lot that you can do with scripts, and we're going to go into those very, very shortly. For the time being, though, let's leave this blank. Choose the number that you would like to use to make the call. And remember, we created our Academy number, so we're going to go ahead and select this. So this is the number that we're going to be using to dial out. The assigned users field is a super useful one. Choose which Gecko users are going to be available to make calls within this campaign. Gecko supports the ability to import and manage a bunch of different contact fields on the contact record, and there you can have multiple telephone numbers. So one student could feasibly have a cell phone number or a mobile number. They could have a home telephone number, a parent number. There could be a few numbers that you're tracking for each individual contact, and Gecko lets you choose which of those numbers on the contact record you want to dial. This is a bad example because I only have one contact field called telephone to select here, but if there were other telephone contact fields, you could select them. A controversial but useful option is also the ability to record calls automatically. So if one of your call agents here makes a call, do you want that to be listenable and downloadable from Gecko? Really useful for a training, development, and ongoing support perspective, but it is important. Again, it's going to vary by region, but it is good to know what you would need to say to the student. Is this something you're going to need to actively inform them of at the beginning of the call? And if so, that's a great thing you could bake into your script, for example. Campaign fields allows you to choose which of the fields on the student contact record should be referenced in the overview of the campaign. Sounds confusing, but is very, very simple, and we'll see this actually very shortly. We're going to say, for example, we're interested in seeing the level of study, program of interest, and maybe year of entry. We can choose to sort contacts by whichever criteria we want in ascending or descending order. And finally, we get to the call outcomes. Now, this is a really interesting kind of section, and I want to dwell on this a little bit more. Outcomes effectively are different ways of defining how a call went. So if I make a call to a student and it goes through to voicemail, I could conceivably select an outcome of left message on voicemail. If the student said, hey, it's good to talk to you, but now's not a great time, can you call me back at this time? I could use the reschedule outcome, which would then allow me to pick a time and a date in Gecko, and only at that time will that student be available for call again. So there's a ton of different outcomes you could use. These come into great effect when it comes to reporting in the future, and you've actually got the ability to very, very easily manage any of these by going to settings and searching in outcomes. Now, Gecko does give you a bunch of predefined outcomes, but these can be freely edited or new outcomes created just by clicking New Outcome in the top right-hand corner. Again, we've got a really good Academy article that goes into this in a bit more detail, but you've got very good granular control over when a student should be recirculated back into the campaign, marking them to call again in the future, or when we want to complete the call. So their purpose in this particular campaign is complete. We no longer need to call them. So go ahead and add a couple of different outcomes that you want to allow your agents to use, and go ahead and hit Save Changes. One of the lovely things to point out in Gecko is that if you've accidentally messed something up, or if you've forgotten something, or if you want to change it at any time, you can go back into settings and all of those fields are available to be edited. By default, though, we're landed on the Select Contacts section, which is interesting. It's basically telling us, of all of the contacts in Gecko, who should we add as callable in this campaign. Now, before we add our contacts, it's worth saying that, especially if you're starting this from the perspective of a blank account, it's likely you won't have anyone in your account. We can predicate who is added to the campaign based on a ton of different things, like the different values in contact fields on the contact record, when the contact was created. A really common one could be, for example, have they submitted a response to a form or been part of a broadcast. For this particular example, though, we'll go for maybe the most popular thing that we see with the calls, which is actually importing a list of students. So at the minute we haven't run the imports, we won't see anything here, but we're going to tell Gecko momentarily only include people in the campaign who were part of a particular import. And this gives us a really good excuse to have a look at how importing into Gecko looks. So let's get this set up now. The first thing that I have pre-prepared is a sample import. And here we have just 3 students. It's likely that your imports would be far bigger, but we can see there's a wealth of different information that we're capturing on the students. Now, Gecko is extraordinarily malleable when it comes to the data that you have on your spreadsheets. It doesn't matter if your first and last name are concatenated in the same cell, for example. Gecko's usually got a way of being able to use that data in a meaningful way. The important thing to note, though, is that if you are importing via a kind of flat file import, we would need that in a CSV format in order to import them into Gecko. Once you've downloaded your CSV, let's go to Settings and let's go to Import Data. In the top right hand corner, let's click New Import, and you've got the ability to run a file import from a CSV, which we're going to do momentarily. I've also got some other options. I'm using a test account here that links up with a number of different CRM systems, and depending on your integration type, a lot of them support directly importing via the API, which is really helpful and a big time saver. For our case though, we'll do Academy call campaign import. We'll give it a name. We'll tell Gecko that this is a one-off import. We do support recurring imports from SFTP servers though, which is good to know. And in this particular example, we want to run a contacts import, and this is the file we would like to upload into Gecko. Thank you very much. The first option that you have then is whether or not you want to skip that first row. Now in our example here, we would very much want to, because the first row is populated just with headers, no data of use. But if your spreadsheet just launches straight into that data, you would of course choose to not skip the first row, because we don't want to miss that first person out. It then becomes a very simple game of matching what data is included in which cell on the spreadsheet to which contact field in Gecko do we want to link this to. Now, helpfully within Gecko, if we open up another tab, you can manage which fields you import data into by going to Settings and Contact Fields. And again, by default here, you have a number of fields: full name, email, telephone, preferred language, and organization. But you're free to build any types of attributes or field as you'd like. These can be reordered as needs be, and building them is a case of clicking New Contact Field in the top right-hand corner, giving it a name, choosing the type of data you want to save in that field. And if you're using something like a drop-down or a radio choice or checkboxes that use a pick list, you can also choose which pick list to use in Gecko. Importing these, using these field options lists is very easy. Here we're in Settings, Field Options, and you can choose to manually add these values, and we support both display values and export values, which is really useful for sending things like GUIDs to CRM systems. You can copy and paste this information rather than typing it out line by line. And you also have the ability, if you've set up an integration, of being able to import an options list directly from that particular platform. So a lot of flexibility with that. But anyway, back to our import. In our first, we can actually see a little preview here. What's in this particular column, it's the header row says first name, but then we've got Johnny, we have Gecko. If we do a bit more of a preview, we have engage. So we can see here, Johnny, Gecko, and engage. So we can see, this is the first name. So we can tell Gecko that this should be linked to the contact field called full name. And specifically, I want to map this to the first name. So you can see earlier I said if it was concatenated first name, last in the same cell, we could accommodate that. But in this case, the spreadsheet is breaking that out. We're then mapping the last name to the last name. We're mapping email address to email address. This is part of the telephone, it's the dial code. This part is the telephone, and it's the main body of the number. And whilst we're on the telephone, this is a useful thing to point out. In settings, account settings, you have the ability to do a number of things, like choose how your account is branded, choose which date format we're showing in dates, whether it's military time or 12-hour AM PM, and a bunch of other things like the color and logos and branding style that we're using. You've also got this field, which is really useful, and it basically says when we're doing exactly what we're doing now, importing from a spreadsheet, which country code should we assume any number is from? So if we come back to our spreadsheet here, we've noticed we've got 3 different telephone numbers. It's all the same telephone number in reality, but we're basically telling Gecko if we don't have a dial code, if this cell is blank, then automatically add the dial code for this country, the United Kingdom, +44. But if somebody specifies a dial code otherwise, so +1 for US, +31 for the Netherlands, then overwrite that default setting. So it gives you a good degree of granularity when it comes to contacts, especially if you're only going to be calling international or, only going to be calling domestic contacts. Let's choose to map the nationality to the nationality contact field, program of interest to program of interest, and year of entry to year of entry. Once we're done, we're going to go ahead and click Finish Import. And very, very quickly, we can see it wasn't many contacts. We've imported those. We've actually only imported one contact, and for two of the other contacts, it looks as if they already existed on Gecko. So we merged them into an existing contact. So all three are now successfully imported, but crucially, they all now belong to this import that we just ran. So let's go back to our campaign that we're setting up, and we can now say I'm only interested, we'll just give this a save and we'll give this a quick refresh because we've just run a import. We can say to Gecko now that we are only interested in importing students who were part of the import we've just completed. So we'll then say in the conditions, only show me people who were part of the import which equaled the Academy call import, and hit the refresh icon. And we'll see Gecko now queries the system and it says, great, I found those 3 students for you who were part of that import. And we can see when they were created. One of them was created more recently than others, one of them, and some of them have been existing on the system for a wee while. We can further refine these settings and these conditions by adding additional ones. So we could say, for example, I want anyone who was part of this import or another import that came earlier, for example. We could additionally add more and or logic, and we could say, and I'm interested in anyone who has a program of interest which contains any of these values. So a lot of useful conditions that you can use to make sure you're absolutely getting the right contacts for you. Once you're happy with your contacts, just go ahead and hit Save Changes, and that's going to add the contacts to the campaign. Now, let's go over the Segments tab, which I think is one of the most important settings and one of the most useful for our campaign here. Segments effectively allow you to choose which of your call agents, that if you remember, we defined which call agents we were using back in the settings, and we said in the campaign options, these are our call agents who are going to be making the calls. In select contacts, we said here are the contacts, and segments is where we marry those 2 data points up, where we can say, if we can specify conditions, and we can say, for example, if somebody's nationality is equal to, let's say the Netherlands, because on our import we had somebody who was from the Netherlands, then what we can do is we can see we've found one person who meets this condition. Then we're going to make sure that this particular contact is called by our student who speaks Dutch in this example. And this is a wonderful way of making sure the right person makes the right call. We sometimes see this based on city or state or address, and making sure somebody from that state is calling them because they have that natural affinity. They're going to be able to build rapport that bit better. It might be that if somebody's anticipated major or course or program of interest is a certain degree, like engineering, let's get our caller who's studying engineering to call them because they're going to be able to build rapport that bit better. You can do a bunch of different segmentation if you'd like. This could be as simple as anyone whose name starts with A through M is called by this person. Just any way of tackling that large group of students. You can then say, in addition to once these callers have finished calling the student, do you want them to stop calling completely, or do you want them to fall back to help out other callers with their particular segments too? So a lot of flexibility with the segmentation there. Let's go through the next area, which is workflows. Now, workflows in Gecko are incredibly important. They're a great way of being able to automate a ton of things. We're going to create just one workflow, but it's going to take us down the proverbial rabbit hole and introduce a bunch of useful concepts like how do we send an email message? How do we send a text? And to illustrate this with an example, we're going to create a workflow and we're going to call it voicemail. Now, the way the workflows work, not only in call campaigns, but across Gecko, is by effectively looking out for conditions, looking out for certain things to take place. And if those conditions take place, what do we want to happen? What actions do we want to run and when? So in our example, maybe one of the conditions we want to create is if the outcome, remember the outcomes to the call, if the outcome is equal to left a voicemail, then rather than having our call agents have to worry themselves with sending a text or sending an email or writing a note on the contact record, we just want Gecko to immediately send an email and a text to the student saying, hey, don't worry about the missed call. It's important. but we're going to try calling you again. This is Gecko University, by the way. Now, at the minute, we would then say immediately, and we would choose send an email, send a text, but we don't yet have an email to send, and we don't yet have a text message to send. So let's go ahead and remedy that. Let's go to settings. To settings, and navigating to email and SMS templates. And this is effectively where all of your emails and all of your texts live. Let's click New Template in the top right hand corner and tell Gecko what type of message we're going to create. Let's start with an email first. Now, depending on what type of package you have with Gecko, you're either going to have the ability to access the basic editor, drag and drop in HTML, or just these two options here, basic and import HTML. We're going to go with the basic editor for that particular reason, but the good news is the methodology that applies to all of these is really similar, and if you want to get granular on the different editor types and the strengths and weaknesses, what they do, we do have a fantastic article on emails in the Academy. Let's begin by giving our template a name. So we're going to call this the Academy, helps if you can spell, left voicemail. This is the internal name only. We can then choose a subject line and we can say, we left you a message. And then let's go ahead and click next. Now, you've got a couple of options. This works just like any other email builder. We can type in there, we can say, hi student, we tried to call you today, but weren't able to get through. We'll try calling again another time. In the meantime, go here to learn more about Gecko. Regards, Gecko. Okay. So there's a few things that we can do to jazz this up. Firstly, if you don't want to manually create this and use the rich text editing options to make this look pretty, and you do have a template that already exists, my goodness, you can just import it. If you click the source code icon, you can delete everything in here and just paste any of your HTML in, which will render then straight away in the WYSIWYG here. One of the most exciting things, especially if you've never used them before, that Gecko offers though, is the ability to templatize so much of the message. So for example, saying hi student, incredibly impersonal, wouldn't recommend doing it. Instead of that, we can scroll down a wee bit. I'll zoom out, I'll make my screen normal size. We can tell Gecko, I want to input a template tag. I want to dynamically pull information from the record, and specifically I want to take information from the student's contact record, the contact record of the student we're sending this email to. And specifically, I'd like their name. But not just their full name, because that's again a bit impersonal. I want their first name. And I'll hit the plus icon, and we can see that Gecko's now going to fill in the gap here. And so rather than it saying hi student, it's going to say hi whatever the student's name is. We can do a bunch of other useful things as well. We can tell Gecko that we're interested in the time of the call. So we could say we tried to call you today, and we can say at. And we can push in the time that we tried calling at. So we tried calling today at this start time, but we weren't able to get through. We'll try calling another time. Finally, rather than signing off the email with regards Gecko University, I should probably tell them it's Gecko University and not an actual Gecko emailing them, we could say, I want to say that this is coming from the user dot, and then I think it is full name by the looks of it. So the user.fullname. So whichever user was making the call, insert their name here. So really useful. We could also do user.position, so it looks more like an email signature. And we'll make this bold as well. So really simply, we've built a very quick template, and we're telling Gecko whatever the student's name is, whatever time the call took place at, whichever user made that call, and whatever their position is, add it to this template. Let's do the same, but in text message form now. In fact, it probably makes sense if I copy some of this. So we'll say, we'll build a new SMS, and we'll do this a bit quicker. So settings, email and SMS templates. It's an SMS, left voice. We'll say hi, and again, we'll use this down here. Go to the contact record, find the student's full name, and put in their first name. Oopsie. We tried to reach you today, but weren't able to get through. We'll try calling again soon. Perfect. Okay. So we have our templates ready to send. Now, if you remember, when we created our VoIP number, we craftily included the clause that we were able to send text messages. So we're completely ready to now create that workflow to send our text message. For emails, though, in the same way that we need a VoIP number to make a call or send a text, we need a sender in order to send our email templates. And this can be managed by going to Settings, Verified Senders and Domains. And here you have two options for sending emails through Gecko. You can create individual senders, and that's done by going to the senders page, clicking New Sender, coming up with the sender name, so it could be Johnny Richardson, and then adding the email address for Johnny here. And once I hit save, what's going to happen is the real email address that we enter here is going to get an email from Amazon Web Services saying, hey, Gecko's requested to use this. Are you okay with that? If you click the link, it's going to redirect you back to Gecko. And if you're able to log in, then this sender will be marked as verified, and you can immediately start sending sending emails out through Gecko from this email address, or a spoofed version of this email address. Now, for those of you who are familiar with this kind of system and functionality before, this is not very secure. If I was trying to send emails to an actual Gecko Engage email address from my spoofed Gecko email address here, it's likely that the network will see, you're pretending to be someone on this network, but this isn't an actual one, so let's block this. It's marked as spam. To combat that, you have the ability to also create a domain, which can be verified very easily just by getting your IT team to verify the domain. And we support things like DKIM verification, mail from, SPF verification too, which will greatly improve the chances of the email being set. And it also means you can create any emails you like, and as long as it ends in this suffix, then you'll be able to start sending emails out through Gecko. So for example, we could say Academy email, and we could say academy@geckoengage.com. Now, this isn't an email address that exists at all, but because our domain is verified for Gecko Engage, we can now pretend as if this is a real email and start sending out shortly from it. Right, let's go back to our campaign workflows. Let's refresh the page and let's set up what we were going to do before, which is our left voicemail workflow. And again, we're going to add that condition, and we're going to say the outcome. If the outcome of the call is left the message on voicemail, then immediately, although we could have a delay, we could say maybe 5 minutes is probably more prudent, because it's going to look more like somebody's typed this out, even if in reality they haven't. But in this case, for the demo, we'll say let's immediately send this out. And we want to do two things. We want to send a text message, and here's the template we want to use, and we can preview that if we've forgotten what it said. In fact, I think that's the wrong one, so I'm glad I previewed that. So we tried to reach you today. We'll say here's the number to send it from, so our Academy number, and we automatically want to target the student. We can also add another action, and we want to send an email, and this time we want to send this to whatever email is on the contacts record, so the student's email address. We could press Control and also choose other Gecko users to receive a copy of this, or we could say this should go to an external email address as well. Totally up to you how you want to configure this, but in this case, let's just send this to the student. Here's the template that we want to send, and again, let's preview that. If we want to change anything, we absolutely can. Here's the sender that we want to send this from. And do we want to honor consent? So if they've opted out, do we still send it to them? And let's say yes in this example. Perfect. You've also got the ability to do a bunch of other things with the workflows. So for example, do we predicate this on other outcomes? So if it's complete, thanks very much for speaking to us. If it's mark as removed, sorry for contacting you today, you can base this off of any contact fields, off of any metadata. So for example, if we call them more than 2 times, do we want to assign a label to the contact saying, watch out, we've already tried contacting them a bunch. One of my favorite use cases that we see here, which is a fantastic way of doing this, really, is if the outcome is equal to no answer, or number disconnected, or wrong number, then what we immediately do is send an email instead to the student saying, we tried calling you today, but the number isn't working. Can you fill in this form, please, to just really quickly update your telephone number so we have the correct one in the future? So a lot of flexibility with work workflows, and they're really useful to get sorted. Now, finally, before we pull all of the pieces together, I'm really keen to show you how we can build a quick script to use on the system, so that we're offering a little bit of guidance to our particular users when they're going through making these calls. And we can manage our scripts by going to the Call Scripts section and clicking New Script in the top right-hand corner. And we'll call this our Academy script. We'll put an exclamation point to prove how exciting that is. And then we have a bunch of different fields that we can reuse throughout our script. And consider this the body here. The star of the show when you're building scripts is going to be in the Form Fields section and using the text block field. So we can add a couple of these different text blocks, and let's go ahead and hit save. And we could, for example, say, hi there, am I speaking with... And again, same as we were using our template tags in our email, am I speaking with, and then the student name. This is a user dot full name, I think it was for us. This is user calling from Gecko. So the very first line, this could be the first line for everyone, and whichever contact we're opening this in with, it's going to dynamically pull through their first name. We could then add another field, and we could say radio choice, yeah. Is the student free? And we could say yes, and we could say no. And we could have two different options depending on what the student says. Now, of course, you can make this as complex or as simple as you want. I just want to show you very quickly that we're going to get two different colored text based on what the student says. We've got a lovely bright pink and a lovely bright orange. We can use conditional logic to say only show this if the field called is the student free is equal to yes. And we'll flip the logic for this one, and we'll say only show this if is the student free is equal to no. So this is a very, very simple example, but it just highlights that you're able to make the script very different based on the inputs from the student. Here's, I think, a slightly more fleshed out example where we're saying, hi, can we speak to somebody? What do you need help with? And providing a bit of information. And we actually have workflows set up on the script to send an email to an individual team based on what the student is needing help with, meaning that it's a very effective way of being able to triage for questions like, oh, is there anyone else I can put you in contact with? We can automatically email those teams externally based on what the student says in the script. So, oopsie, wrong script. Lots of different things you can do, lots of different fields available to you, and whether or not you do want to line by line say, here's what I want you to say, or if it's just more general, hey, talk about this, this, and this. Make sure you find out the answer to this question. Do they want to attend open day? Yes or no, or we could have different options for different dates. All of that information can be collected on the script. Once your script is ready though, and a good thing to note, once you've created it, they can be cloned again for future reference if you just want to bounce off of them in the future. It can be assigned into your campaign, again by going to settings, campaign options, and adding the Academy script and hitting save. So let's just take stock of what we've done, because we've covered a ton of ground in a very short space of time. We've learnt a little bit about the navigation in Gecko. We've learned how to create a VoIP number to start calling and texting. We've learned how to create verified senders and domains for emailing. We've touched on contact fields, field options lists that belong to those. We've imported a group of contacts into the system, and we've learnt about filtering. We've created our campaign, we've assigned users, we talked about segmentation and getting everything set up from a script perspective, and we've also automated our workflows so that if we leave a voicemail message, we're automatically going to send a text and an email to the student saying who it was who called them. All that said, let's pull everything together now and get ready to start calling. On the Overview tab, we'll see the number of contacts which are available to call, and you can see a bunch of those different contact fields that we're displaying here as well. You can choose to filter by different statuses, and it's also worth pointing out that these colored circles can be hovered over to see and denote the status of the caller. When you're ready to start making a call, just click into a contact. We'll click into this one called Gecko Student, and it's going to take you to a really nice view of the student. Now we're actually kind of within the contact record here. We can see all of the details on the student, all of the other previous activity in the campaign, in this case no activity because no one's called them yet. But the nice thing about this is you can actually hop between the different tabs here, so I can see any emails the students received previously, and I can actually read those and view them. So we can see, oh, this person was sent a form on this particular thing. We can view any previous form responses or calls or campaigns they were part of, any events they attended as well. So there's a lot of different things that we can do. When I'm ready to actually make the call here, I can hit the Start Call button, which opens up this pane here on the right. And I can choose to simply start call.
Connecting your call.
Now that's not a real number, or at least not one I know about, so I'm not going to actually call it, but let's pretend it was dialing. Now the cool thing about this is you've got the ability to use the touchpad there to be able to select numbers to mute the call, but crucially you can flip between the call window here and the call script. So we can see, hi there, am I speaking with Gecko Student? And we can see the student is indeed Gecko Student. This is Johnny Richardson, pulling in the name of the user making the call from Gecko. Is the student free? Yes, no. So we have conditional logic dictating what we're showing next on the script. And this is a very small example. Please forgive me, I don't want to batter home the point of this, but a very small example. You could absolutely build this out to some really, really intelligent workflows. Once we've submitted the script, let's go ahead and hit submit. We are ready to submit an outcome, and calls cannot be finished until an outcome has been given. So remember, we had a workflow to send an email and a text to the student if we left a voicemail. We can choose for this particular outcome to leave a note as well. And let's go ahead and click complete call. And we can see the contact is going to be available to be called again pretty much immediately, and we see that log of the call being left right here. From the call agent's perspective, all they need to do now is click next call because that's all they need to do. They don't need to worry about sending any email comms or any kind of communications. So very, very easy to manage. Now, if I bring my emails down to this particular window, we'll see that student we just tried calling, stupidly called Gecko, has just received a message. So here's the time we tried calling you at, but we weren't able to get through. And we're pulling through the name of the user who made that call and their position as well. And you may be thinking, well, that's kind of cool, but where does that position come from? It actually comes from the user settings we're going to go through shortly when you're creating a new user, and we can see it's just purely referenced the position field. So very easy to manage. We can fly through calls in no time. This is a fantastic way of streamlining things because effectively all we're telling the callers to do is make those calls and hit submit, choose an outcome that reflects how the call went, and we're good to go. So we can see here you can mute your microphone. You can also open the number pad if needs be. I'll end that call because I don't want to call myself, and we'll maybe say this was complete. Perfect. And we'll do the final call that we have here. We'll try calling them, and let's say we had technical difficulties with this student. Again, we can see Gecko Student, the name is pulling through, dynamic to the student, and we'll say this one was the wrong number. So we're going to remove call consent, which is going to remove them from the campaign. So very easy to do, and we've managed to use those very simply. We've got one succeeded call, our student who we managed to succeed with. We've got our first contact that we tried calling who's recycled back into the system because we left a voicemail message for them, and our third contact which has disappeared. They've been removed from the campaign because they didn't have an eligible number. Well, you may be thinking, well, what happens if a student calls back? Can we edit any of those details? And yeah, the short answer is any information in Gecko, almost any information can be edited. So we can see here's a call we made to Johnny Richardson just now as part of the campaign. We can choose to edit this call. We can change information such as the duration. We can change the outcome of this as well. So if the student does call back or if something needs to change, it is very, very easy to do. Likewise with any script responses, they can all be edited from the responses section if they were to call back or information was to change. Now, a really important part of judging the success of any campaign is going to be with the reporting and the return on investment. What we can glean from how our callers and students have engaged with the actual call campaign itself. On the overview page of your call campaign, you have an Actions tab, which allows you to view a live report, as well as exporting the data for external analysis or cloning it if you want to riff off of it for future campaigns. But the View Live report gives you access to a really useful dashboard where you can assign any filters that you've created over any date ranges for any individual campaign. And it will give you a breakdown of calls by outcome, calls by users, and we have over, I think it's 141 separate widgets that you can add to these dashboards to give you even more insight into the types of activities that are taking place. Further to that, you have access to the frankly embarrassing assortment of enrichments that come from the calls section. This is you have 5 different tabs that each do wildly unique things that give you a breakdown of things like total agents online, people ready, callers in queue, and also being able to break down and look from this top page at all of the calls that are taking place. These can be aggregated though and viewed in the calls section, where we can apply filters like dates, statuses, types, users who are making the calls, campaigns or outcomes that are being assigned, and viewed in very different ways as well. Furthermore, you can choose from the reporting perspective, personally my favorite when it comes to the reporting on the calls, a ton of performance metrics. So do we want to view how many calls, if you want, for example, if you were ever interested in on what hour of the day we tend to have more people leave a voicemail, so we can target when our team are actually going to be in and making the calls. This is the place for you, because you can predicate it on things like outbound calls over this date range, viewing increments where the outcome is left voicemail. It gives a really great data tapestry. So a lot of information that can be gleaned, in addition to all of that information being exportable fully from Gecko. The final things that I'd like for us to talk about today is just simple management things. So how do we go about adding new users to the system? Because we've now learnt how we can get all of our communication set up, how we can get our scripts set up, how we can import students, how we can create our contacts, and how we can report. It's important that we actually have people doing the work, making those calls, if it's not going to be yourself. And this is one of the easiest things to manage. It's settings, and it's by going to users. Here, it's very easy to do. You have all of your available users. You can sort by different statuses, and you can click New User in the top right-hand corner. And here, you're going to be able to provide the name of the user and their email address, which is required. You can then also optionally add in their telephone number, which is super useful. You can add in their user group, which is essential. Now, by default, we have a number of pre-built groups, but you are fully able to create your own user groups. And this is oftentimes one of the first questions that people ask us: how do permissions work in Gecko? And the short answer is you can tailor them to yourself. So what would you like people to be able to do? Do you want them to be able to view, create, update, delete, or listen in certain circumstances to different parts of the system? Do you want them to be able to view and update contacts and create them, but not be able to delete them? Do you want them to be able to view form responses, scripts, but not touch users or user groups, not allow them to export information, but importing is fine? You've got granular control over what each individual group can do. One super user group to point out though is the pre-built call agents. And if you are just purely wanting to create a student worker, for example, and all they're going to be doing is calling, we recommend using this predefined group. It's everything they need to be able to make calls, but when they log into the system, they don't even see this bar on the left-hand side. All they see is the call campaigns, and the only call campaigns that they'll see are the ones that they are assigned. So they don't get to access or touch any other settings in Gecko, but they have everything they need to do everything as a call agent. Once you've added a user group and potentially added in some of the other information like mobile or position that can be pulled into any call campaign, make sure that you enable VoIP for them, and you can select which telephone number by default you want them to start making calls for. You can, on an agent by agent basis, also use that record calls button, which will make sure that every call that they make is recorded, or you can choose to toggle that off and instead manage that on a campaign by campaign basis. The final thing, once you've set that all up, hit save changes. It sends an invite to the user. They just simply need to click the link, set a password for themselves, and log in, and they're good to go. The final thing that I wanted to run through here, though, is integrations. And it may be that some of you, particularly if it's a brand new account, particularly if you're a system administrator, you're keen on getting to this as one of your first projects, and that's a really important thing to do. Integrations can be managed by going to Settings, Integrations, and Gecko supports a wealth of different types of integration. Now, in all honesty, if we were to run through all of these today, it would probably be a 20-hour video instead of a 1-hour one. So what I would strongly recommend doing is going to the integrations section of the website. By the website, I mean the Academy, looking for your integration and following the steps there. There you'll learn and have video walkthrough guides on how everything is mapped, created, how things look in different systems as well, and it should be a very good resource. Thanks ever so much for taking the time to watch this video. We hope it was instructional. Again, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to you. But we're really excited to see what you can do with the Cloud Call Center.